Sincerely speaking, it is not that those decisions we're about to take are not actually good enough for us, or it is not that that step we're trying to take is not the best thing to do, or maybe it is not that that thought we have in our head is not entirely wrong. But the reality is that most times, as human beings, we always want to make sure that we have a lot of things in the right place. Maybe our thoughts, or maybe we have somebody or some people acknowledge the fact that what is going on in our head is actually correct. As much as that ideology is actually good for human being to thrive, but at the same time, it can be a sabotage that can ruin our lives. And that is because when we continue to linger on external validations, people's opinion, people's thoughts and considerations about situations, rather than listening to our own core belief and concept about things, it slows us down as a human. And at the same time, it affects the results we are likely to have within a period of time. And I figure that one concept that actually disturbs we human beings, especially when we are navigating through the path of life, trying to take up decisions, walk through the next step, or even decide or have a settlement that a particular decision or step is actually right for us, is that we always have this urge to ask and seek and to know or understand if what we are actually thinking is true. But I figure that self doubt is not actually lack of confidence, but the fact that we always want every ounce of our body, every part of our being, and most likely all the people around us to acknowledge that that step we're taking is actually the best decision. But to navigate the path of the world itself, you don't actually need 100% approval that that decision you're taking or that step you're taking is actually the best thing for you. All you have to do is just take the leap of faith and do that regardless, even if you don't even trust yourself 100%, or even if you don't have people trust you to do that thing 100%. And it is one thing I actually battled with over and over again, even up till now. But I figured that the more I keep wallowing in that circle, in that decision, the harder it gets for me to actually bring anything to life. And I decided that I actually want to create an anchor for myself so that subsequently I can have something to watch, something to listen to that would be an anchor for me to actually understand the whole concept of building self trust and actually stopping my self doubt. So, as usual, I have divided this video into up to like 4 to 5 sections. That is starting with the very first foundation, why self doubt actually exists. One thing is that the more we keep navigating in this path, the harder it gets for us to actually not do without external validation. And that is one of the primary basics. One of the basics of why self doubt exists is that we are always wired to seek external validation. And that is because we always try to make sure that that decision we are taking is actually the best thing for us. But not in every situation can we actually acknowledge that that decision we're taking is best for us until we actually take the step to performing that action. I want you to wonder that sometimes some things you do out of the blue without considering what somebody else has to say is actually one of the best decisions you could have actually made in your entire life. And this has happened to me over and over again. But I figured that why I keep getting stuck, or why we keep getting stuck in this dilemma cycle, is because we have been wired to always seek external validation. For example, mom, is this decision actually right for me? True, we can actually have some people that might probably have to walk us through some paths, but not in every situation of your life will you actually need external validation. All you have to do is just compound that trust within yourself and take that step. And the second reason why self doubt actually exists is that, past mistakes always control our emotional scar. And I think it is one thing we can't actually shy away from. One of the reasons why people don't actually take decisions, which I'm going to be getting into shortly, is that we fear failure. And at the same time, when this failure actually happens, it actually gives us a kind of reoccurrence in emotional scars. And because of that, we don't want to fall into the same trap. We don't want to fall into the same circle again. But the reality of life is that you need to keep taking that leap of faith to actually do what is necessary. And one thing about success is that it is not the amount of time you fail, it is about the amount of time you are able to rise up regardless of the failure. And confidence is not just built in what you're saying, it is built in action. Continuously choosing to stand up even when you fall or even when you feel your legs are shaking. And that is one thing I always want to keep reminding myself over and over and over again. I understand that there are past mistakes we must have walked into that is probably affecting the way we are thinking and the likes of them. But the more we keep dwelling on those past mistakes, the harder it gets for us to keep clarity. And you must have noticed that those past mistakes you have actually done before were actually one of those things you were able to learn and build a better pathway for yourself today. So why not just take it as an other new opportunity again for you to actually learn something new? And thirdly, which is also an extension of the point three, is that we are so scared of making the mistake or we are so scared of failing. Failure is actually part of the process. And I keep telling myself over and over and over again, I am going to fail because you're doing something new that you might probably not have done before, or probably people around you have not actually been doing before. So the moment you step into that new circle to check something or to do something entirely new, the more opportunity you have to fail. But the more you are failing, the clearer the whole thing begins to get. One of the things successful people don't joke with, especially those that are actually building their wealth, is that they don't always dwell on the mistakes they make or they have. Rather, they put the whole concept of the mistakes together and build another story entirely from where they are coming from. Making mistakes or failing is actually part of the entire process. And lastly, we always fear judgment, and these actually keep us small. One thing that I actually battled with over and over again is the fear of judgment. And as a single mother like myself, there are so many things that when I step into it, or when I say it, or when I do it, a lot of people will always have feedbacks, and especially negative feedbacks. But the reality is that the more you keep dwelling on other people's opinion and perspective about you, the harder it gets for you to attain that clarity because they are not actually the one living in your life. And when you take a deeper look at it, when the entire story bounces back, you are going to be the one that will be affected. But when you are able to snap out of the entire situation, you are also going to be the one to reap the results. So now the choice is yours. Do you want to still keep treading on the path of the judgment or what somebody else has to say over your own opinion? Or you want to keep checking that thought you have in your head if it is actually the best option for you? And I'm very, very sure once you start drifting away from what other people have to say about you start getting more clarity about yourself. And even if you feel even when you feel, there is still this contentment you should have within you that would acknowledge the fact that you have actually taken the step that massive people are not actually willing to take. Now, when it comes to building self trust, what does that actually stand for? The concept of self trust is about being reliable to yourself. You know, one thing is that even those we expect that they are going to be giving us the pathway to build that life we are looking for, they have actually walked through the step of being reliable to themselves. And they are able to use that as a yardstick to nurture us, to groom us. And that does not mean every single thing they say about us is entirely true. But one of the good things you can actually do for yourself is to be reliable to yourself. Because subsequently, or most time in every area of our life, you should take responsibility for yourself. Every single aspect of your life depends on you, depends on the decision you actually take. So when you trust yourself, that means you believe in your own thoughts and decision even when you fail, even when you are so scared, even when you feel the step you're taking might not actually be the right one, but for the fact that you believe in your own thoughts and your decision to be true, that is actually a good sign that you trust yourself, and that is one thing every woman seeking intentional and transformational life should hold on to. And one of the things self trust actually builds is that you follow through what you say you will do. And I can't overemphasize on this enough because one of the reasons why most of us are not achieving the success we actually aspire to have is because we don't always follow through with what we say. We say something and we do otherwise. we set goals and we fall short of those steps we have actually mapped out to do something better with our lives and our times. But one way you can actually build a transformation life, a life built on intention and success, is when you say you will do something and you actually do that thing. And also, when you trust yourself, you'll be able to listen to your intuition before other people's opinion. As much as I want to believe that those that have walked in my shoe would probably have better advice to give me, but at the same time, I am also bound to learn from my own mistakes because this is my journey. One thing I always tell to myself is that success is not a one way ticket. A lot of people are achieving success through multiple entry, and that depends solely on how you define success or what success actually means to you. So it does not mean that people's opinion are actually entirely bad to an extent, especially for those that have actually worked in your shoe. But because you need to trust your intuition enough, because this is your life and everything that comes after will definitely bounce back on you. And at the same time, trusting yourself actually encompasses you forgiving yourself even when you understand that you have actually made a lot of mistakes or you have actually decided to walk away from some things you think you're supposed to be holding on to dearly. Now, sometimes we need to understand all of this concept because we feel we trust ourselves enough, but there are certain notions that come around the fact that we don't actually trust ourselves enough. And for you to actually not to trust yourself enough, it shows that there are some signs you might probably be neglecting, or you feel they are so inconsequential for you to begin to deliberate on. Now, I'm going to be talking about few of them here before we actually get into the steps. And the first sign that actually indicates that you don't trust yourself enough is that you constantly ask for advice from people, and at the same time, you already know the answer. There is always this thought that comes to our mind when we are seeking other people's opinion about something. But deep down inside of you, you already know the answer. You already know what you are looking for. All you are looking for is just validation that your thoughts are actually correct. But I can actually compound all of this to indicate that you don't trust yourself enough. Trusting yourself does not necessarily mean you might not need a validation, but you trust yourself enough to take that step before somebody else push you to do that. And the second thing that actually show, the second sign that actually indicate that you don't trust yourself enough is that you overthink small decisions. And I think I wallow in this over and over again. Should I save for investment or should I save for my marketing hat? There are certain things that we don't actually need to make a big deal out of. Investment is actually a long time earning process, which is actually bound with compound effect. So even if it is a tiny amount you save today, it will create a lot of massive change. But at the same time, you can start the investment when you save for your business hat and you make enough sales. So, sometimes there are certain things we are actually thinking about that does not actually unnecessarily require us thinking and thinking and thinking. But we are always stuck in taking that decision because we don't trust our intuition to make the right decision. And also, you apologize for being yourself, especially to others. When people come to you and say, why would you choose to do this when we are supposed to be doing this together? Not actually understand that actually help you to achieve your goal faster. And at the same time, you now keep talking and talking and talking so that the person can understand why you are choosing your own growth over our ease or our own, just a way utilizing the time based on ease or our own notion. One of the things you can actually do for yourself that would create a lot of massive shifts in your life is when you take decision to step up to something that will change your life and you still have to explain to somebody why you have taken that decision is to actually walk away from conversations that would not get you any closer to achieving your goal. And I figure that when you don't trust yourself enough, you always apologize to people for being yourself, for taking that decision, for taking that step, for raising to that call, for walking out of that decision, for stepping out of that relationship and the likes. And at the same time, the moment you stop taking action until someone validates you is actually one of the big signs that indicates you don't trust yourself. And I think I've mentioned this over and over again. You don't necessarily need to wait on people's validation or permission before you start taking those decisions. And that is because, there are most of us that we always want to wait and hold on to that validation that what we are doing is actually right. And maybe you don't actually start project, or maybe you start project and don't actually finish them. Because during the line when you're working on that thing, there is something that begins to whisper to you that you don't have it under control, or this might not last, or this success might not actually be meant for you, or the whole of this thing you're doing will not take you anywhere. One thing you should understand that everybody have inner critics and everybody always battle with their inner voice. But those that are able to achieve success are the ones that are able to acknowledge their inner voice and silence the fact that they have this, but they can actually become something better regardless. And even if this does not take them anywhere immediately, subsequently it will definitely compound to the result they are looking for. And then this is what will actually take me to the very first point on how you can actually stop self doubt and start practicing self trust, which I have done over and over again. The first thing is to acknowledge the inner voice and silence it. One thing we need to do as human beings when we are faced with difficulties or negative feedback is to acknowledge the situation we are living in. There is nothing good out of you shying away from being objective with yourself. You need to have some serious and realistic conversations with yourself that you understand these things actually exist and you're willing to find your way around it, not just by discarding your feeling or numbing your pain. Call a spade and acknowledge it for what it is. Acknowledge the fact that you're always having this inner voice. And because of the fact that you have that, at this point, you are taking charge of your life. Because this is your life, and whatever you allow to happen to you is what will eventually compound to be your future that you're working so hard to achieve. Acknowledge the fact that you have this inner voice and at the same time silence the voice because the voice cannot continue to keep lingering and raising its tune in your head. The more the volume begins to increase, the harder it gets for you to actually have any form of clarity. You don't have to argue about the fact that you are not good enough. All you have to do is let yourself understand that you might not be good enough at this time, but you are definitely work in progress. You might have failed a couple of times, but at this time you're willing to put in the works for you to actually succeed. Find you might have set a lot of goals and you have not been able to meet up with those goals, but at this time you really want to stand by this and you want to make this a success. All you have to do is just rewire that programming that says you cannot to the point whereby you can convince yourself that you can. And secondly, you need to start keeping small promises because sometimes that massive shift we are looking for does not necessarily need to come from a massive action. All we have to do is just take those small steps and eventually watch those small steps compound into bigger results. Start doing what you say you would do. It can actually be as small as beginning to wake up early, not getting junks from the public, cooking your meal for yourself, and packing and prepping your items whenever you are going to work. Instead of you letting go of the decisions that you feel are so inconsequential, you can begin to take charge of those things. And you'll be so surprised that miraculously or even simultaneously, you begin to take charge of your entire life. So start keeping small promises and begin to also inculcate the habit of speaking kindly to yourself every day. And also, one of the steps you cannot skip, which is the third one, is to learn from mistakes and study the pattern without self punishment. I understand that you might have failed multiple times, which I have done a couple of times. That is probably affecting the way I take up some decisions consistently. But I figure that those mistakes are not actually there to blindfold me. They are there to be a stepping stone. And the more I keep thinking about my mistakes as mistakes, the harder it gets for me to actually deduce the lesson from it. So instead, I change those mistakes to lessons and make them a stepping stone. And when I look at those mistakes so far, there are patterns to it. Maybe I keep choosing the time that is not fitting for me, or I've not been able to sit down properly and analyze the way I spend my days. And the whole of these patterns has actually some total to end up becoming a mistake. So I begin to actually learn from them instead of me punishing myself. You know, one of the things we do for ourselves unknowingly is that we always call ourselves out like we are just our own enemy. We don't give ourselves that home within us. We don't create that safe space within ourselves to be able to acknowledge and give ourselves that solitude. and that actually affect the way we take most of our decisions. So one of the thing or one of the steps that is very crucial that you cannot do away with is for you to learn from those mistakes and study the patterns. Then accept the fact that you can do better without punishing yourself. Every time you forgive yourself faster, you evolve faster. Every time you acknowledge the fact that you have made a mistake here, but the mistake is just going to be a stepping stone to where you are going, you realize that your life is actually full with so much clarity. And the fourth step that I have done that has actually helped me, that I am still inculcating presently, is to take imperfect action consistently. There is no way you are going to be achieving your goals when you keep taking perfect actions once in a while. Perfect action is not the entire roadmap to achieving that success. It is taking imperfect action because we want to keep the ball rolling as long as it takes forever as it could. And this needs to be done consistently. So you can't think your way into confidence when you don't actually do it through action. Every imperfect, consistent action you take, one step lead to the next one and the next one and then on to the next one. And by the time you look at it, realize that you are far gone from everything you would have actually wanted to do. You might be cooking your meal or posting your content or scheduling your business routine or mapping out how you want to spend the whole week and the likes of them. Just make sure, even if every day does not look perfect, make sure you are still consistent and you are still doing something every day that would keep you closer to that dream you have actually set for yourself. You don't overcome fear before you take the action. How you overcome fear is when you begin to take the action regardless of that fear itself. And the fifth step that I've actually taken that has helped me is to speak to yourself like someone you love. Wallow in yourself and comfort yourself. Sometimes the kind of conversations we're having with ourselves would actually determine the kind of success we'll have. So there are some of us that actually speak to ourselves in a manner that is as if we are in fight or we are an enemy to ourselves. And that would not actually take you anywhere. You need to give yourself that empathy you're willing to give somebody else. You need to be able to wallow in yourself. You don't need to give yourself that thought that says you're a failure, you can't do this. You need to keep replacing those words with, I understand that the whole of this, I am new to it or I am work in progress, but I'm going to try as much as possible to make this a success. And by so you realize that a lot of things are actually shifting. And by the time you keep saying that to yourself, even at the beginning, it might look or sound like you don't feel attached to it, but make sure the steps you are taking also go in line with that thing you are saying to yourself, especially when you encounter a situation that you are trying to decide on or you are trying to be better at. And subconsciously and consciously, you realize that a lot of things are actually falling in place without you even trying so hard. And at the same time, which is the sixth step, is for you to celebrate progress, not just perfection. One thing I always keep saying over and over again is that we are not actually setting goals to achieve a milestone. We are setting goals so that we can actually understand the process. We can actually be intertwined with the journey itself. Because the goal is not actually a destination, it is a journey, it is a process, it is a roadmap that needs to be walked in. And for each phase of this journey, there are so many things that we need to start acknowledging and understanding to fulfill. So when you achieve something or when you are able to do something, even if it is very small, celebrate it as progress, not just perfection, because you need to acknowledge what you are able to do without you even thinking about the bigger picture. Because at the same time, that small achievement you have, when you begin to do that continuously, would eventually sum total into that big picture you are looking for. So, were you able to take some decision without second guessing? Were you able to walk out of that conversation without thinking through? Were you able to do that thing you said you would do without expecting somebody else's validation? The whole of this is how you are going to stop or you are going to silence the inner critic and begin to trust yourself. And most importantly, one thing you cannot do away with when it comes to building the self trust is to spend time alone with yourself. The more you keep listening to the noise outside, the harder it gets for you to actually understand yourself speak. And most parts of our lives are actually influenced by somebody else's decisions and thoughts. That is because we don't spend time with ourselves enough. So, when you sit with yourself in silence, you need to listen to yourself speak and hear your intuition again. That decision you're trying to make with somebody, sit with yourself and think about it on your own. And you'll be so surprised that there are so many things you have not been acknowledging, that you have them buried inside your head, inside your mind, until you actually silence the noise from outside. And that is actually where clarity comes from. That is where the understanding begins to reflect into your life. So you can't trust your voice if you never listen to yourself speak. And at the same time, solitude is not loneliness, it is the classroom for self trust. And it is a way you can begin to connect with yourself over and over again. So start inculcating the habit of self wallow. Listen to yourself and think about some things you have actually conversed with people and see how your mind will begin to unravel different ways for you. And one thing that would happen when you begin to speak to yourself is that when you take time with yourself to think about something and you probably go straight to bed to go and sleep, you'll be so surprised that by the time you wake up in the midnight or you wake up the next morning, something will come to your mind as another step to take to actually see that thought to come to life. And you'll be so surprised that there are so many things you can actually do with yourself. I am recording this video because I want this to be a kind of reminder for myself and a push that I actually have this in control. Because presently, as I'm recording this video, I still battle with self doubt. But I think at the end of this video, I have a lot of concepts I can actually use to anchor myself. And because some of these points has actually worked for me, I believe it can continue to work for me and will also work for you. Now, one of the things that you would get to understand when you begin to trust yourself is that you begin to make decisions without stress. And that is a place I actually want to be. A point whereby you are not actually afraid that the step you are taking is wrong. But the only thing you might be second guessing is that if you don't take the step, so, there is a spot where you get to live and you understand that even if I fail, it is actually still work in progress and I can still keep getting myself back on track. And at the same time, you stop over apologizing because when you take some decisions and you believe you trust yourself, you believe that that decision you're taking is not actually meant for somebody. You don't even bother to stress yourself on conversations that does not even add to your growth. And also, you stop chasing validation and you start creating from confidence, not just fear. There are so many things I've actually wanted to do since last year. And this year, I have told myself that this is when I won't turn back because if I keep turning back, the harder it will get for me to actually become a better version of myself. And the more I keep lingering, the harder it gets for me to actually achieve that success I am looking for. Success does not necessarily have to come in cash, it can also be in terms of the way you live your life generally. And at the same time, there is this particular settlement you have within you that would give you that satisfaction that, oh, I have this under control and I can as well move a lot of things with the confidence I have within me. One thing you need to understand is that the strongest woman is not the one that believes that everything is perfect, but she is the one that believes that even if this step I am taking is wrong, I will still bounce back. And when I bounce back, I will definitely bounce back big. You don't necessarily have to trust every decision you have taken 100%, but you just have to be confident enough to take this next step, which will eventually lead to the next one and the next one and the next one until you eventually become better. And I'm going to see you in my next one. Bye.